As you mentioned, Lowell and I did have a brief sojourn on the national tour. Most people know Virginia is the only state in the country that still has a one-year tenure for its governor, 4 years. When I came in, it was a tough state in terms of money. And I spent 3 months running for president, September to January. The loudest ovation I ever got in the joint session was when I was given a state address, and I said, I will no longer be a candidate for president of the United States. Yay! It was love. But I learned a great deal, and I learned a tremendous amount by going to Iowa and going to New Hampshire. I agree with many of the things that have been said by my colleagues here. There has to be a commitment. But I always resented the state as big as Virginia, 7.5 million people. And I would say to the Democratic colleagues, Bill Clinton first said that to him, you can't campaign in Virginia by sticking your toe in the Potomac from Washington and believe that you're campaigning. I said the same thing to Al Gore. I said the same thing to John Kerry. You've got to campaign with the people. The unfortunate thing is when you have these early front-loaded primaries or Congress or whatever they are, the media follows it. And once the media follows it, the money follows the media. It's very difficult for a candidate to get any traction at all if the media is not there. Hillary Clinton was way ahead of everything and lost an hour, and then they said she was finished. Not finished at all. Just one state. Barack Obama came and lost New Hampshire by 5 points. He said he's falling. He lost by 5 points in New Hampshire. So they're not true barometers of what the people across the country think. The unfortunate thing, though, in that process, it causes so many people to believe certain things are happening. I couldn't agree with Lowell any more than to say amen. It is obscene the amount of money that's being spent. You can't imagine. Running for office today, even at local levels, costs a ton of money. I mean, it's a ton of money. Millions of dollars. You've got to have somebody for everything. You've got to have advanced people. You've got to have people who sit down for weeks and months. You've got to have position papers. You've got to have stylists. You've got to have people who tell you what you think and what you say and who you are. And by the time you go and to measure all of that, you're seeing that politics is now a business. Very little about representing the will of the people. Very little about what the framing fathers had in mind when they started to say we are going to elect a president, we're going to have the electoral votes to do that. And so I think something desperately has to change. Even my good friend says it might be something good about being last relative to Pennsylvania. He'll never tell you he wants New Hampshire to be last. But I'll say this about the people in New Hampshire, as well as in Iowa. They are attuned to the issues. You go to those states, you're going to have to talk to them not one time, nor 2 times, nor several times. They'll say, when are you coming back to see me? After 6 times, when are you coming to my house? When are we going to have coffee? I'm not talking about that handshake that we had in the donut shop. When are we going to have a real sit-down discussion? I want to know more about you. And that's being lost across the country in terms of that direct relationship with the candidates. So I think something needs to be done there. How it's going to be done, I don't know. We've got to watch to see what takes place with Michigan and Florida. We agree in government. I think we all agree here that they'll be seated. But when you just jump out in front, I agree with John on this, you can't jump out in front and say, we picked a date. You got to have a commitment to do it. So yes, something has to change. What will change it, I don't know.
agree 150% with Governor Weicker and Governor Wilder on the impact of money in politics. It is something I don't think any of us like. But having said that, I think all the recent efforts to try and fix it have only made it worse. It is one of these constitutional rights, First Amendment right, that people try and build all kinds of legal fences into and around, and don't realize that whatever they do under the Constitution, people are going to have the right to do something else with their money and participate in the process. And I just hope we stop focusing on trying to write laws to deal with the money issue and create an attitude in America and an understanding in America of what really ought to be heard from candidates and try and make our decisions independent of that. I know it is almost impossible for that wish to come true, but I can tell you it is more impossible for the wish that a piece of legislation will change the participation of money in politics. That is real, and if we spend all our time looking at that, we're going to not be looking at other things that could make an impact on the quality of the election process.
Follow up on what John just said about making things worse once you start legislating. I just agreed to join the ACLU in Connecticut on challenging a new campaign finance law, state law, in Connecticut, which provides public financing for state candidates in Connecticut, state legislature, House, Senate, etc. And the reason I joined with it is that the new law creates public financing, which goes very liberally to either the Republican or the Democratic candidate. If you have to be an independent, you have to jump through all sorts of hoops to get any of that public financing. You've got to get an enormous amount of signatures, somewhere around 100 to 200,000 signatures to even be eligible. Now look, my own feeling is before you start writing any laws as to how to fix politics in the United States, if we would allow competition in politics, as we insist on having it in our economics, believe me, you'll clean up a lot of the mess. But right now you've got a duopoly between Republicans and Democrats, and the independents are being excluded. Here's a specific example in my own state, where when you got campaign financing, which is what people are yelling for, it was tilted in one direction to legislate Republicans and Democrats into the